Hi, everyone. My name's Anna Wagner. I use she and her pronouns. I work with the UU Justice Ministry of California, the UU Church in San Jose, California, and Green Faith. And I'm really excited to be here with two amazing folks who are supporting the Make Polluters Pay legislation. And we're going to give you a quick briefing on the legislation and how you can be a part of supporting its passage. So I'll pass it over to Reverend Brian to introduce himself as well and maybe say briefly what it is about your UU faith that compels you to work on this. And then we'll pass it to Brian. So go ahead. Or sorry, we'll go to Brian first and we'll go to Jason.
Thank you, Anna. I'm Reverend Brian Ferguson. I use he, him pronouns. I serve the Unitarian Universalist Fellowship of Redwood City, and I am really driven around the Make Polluters Pay, around the Unitarian Universalist value of interdependence. We recognize through our interdependence that we are interdependent with the planet we live in. We respect the wonderful web of all existence of which we are part. And our latest Unitarian Universal Values calls us not just to cherish our planet, but to protect it. And I think Make Polluters Pay is an important bill in protecting the planet and really addressing some of the huge impacts, especially those more historically marginalized communities are experiencing with climate change, because they are on the front line of it. And this is a bill that would help offset some of the catastrophic events that are a result of climate change. And I'll pass it to Jason.
Hi, everyone. Jason Pfeifle. I'm a senior climate campaigner with the Center for Biological Diversity. I'm based in Oakland, California, use he, him pronouns. And the Center for Biological Diversity is one of the sponsoring organizations of the Polluters Pay Climate Superfund Act. Really excited to be talking with you all today and to share more about what you all can do to get involved and explain kind of where we're at with the bill.
I
Thank
didn't
you,
talk
Jason.
about my faith at all, so maybe I should jump in and do that. As a Unitarian Universalist, I agree with many of the things Reverend Brian has also said, but my, my faith calls me to love. And when I think about love, I don't think of it as being a passive sort of a value. I think of it as being very active. I think of love as being something that you demonstrate in the streets and through your actions. And I have great love for this gorgeous planet that we are blessed to live on, and the people here who live on this earth. And I believe it's part of my duty as a person of faith to put my values into action. We talk a lot about praying with our feet, and so that's what's compelled me to be a part of this legislation. Is Reverend Brian has said many times, and I agree with this sentiment, that we can make these changes in our own lives, but when we band together and organize and mobilize as the faithful, both inside of our denomination and across denominations with our friends across faith traditions, we have so much power. And we have to use that political power that we have in strategic ways. And this piece of legislation, I think, is very, very smart and very aligned with our values of caring for the earth, of caring for one another, of caring for the least among us, of really honoring communities that are hit first and worst by climate impacts. And so it just feels like a perfect opportunity for us to pray with our feet by not just doing what we can in our own lives, but organizing side by side with strategic efforts across the state to pass legislation that's really going to hold polluters accountable for the mess that they've made and help us transition to a just climate future that we all deserve. So with that, maybe we'll move into the first question is, can you tell us, Jason, about the goal of the Make Polluter Pay bill so that people can understand what is this going on at the state level, and why should we care? Why should we be a part of it?
Yeah. Thanks, Anna. The goal of this bill is to make the largest fossil fuel companies pay for the climate damage that they helped cause in the state of California. California has been hit with numerous climate disasters. We saw the horrific fires in Los Angeles earlier this year. Communities are continuing to feel the escalating harms of those disasters. Californians are also feeling it in their pocketbooks. Utility rates are going up. Home insurance premiums are going up. We're seeing these costs on the rise. And the cost of dealing with these climate disasters should not be falling on taxpayers or working families alone. The oil companies that were the primary driver of the climate crisis should be helping to pay their fair share of the burden of costs that they've inflicted on our state. So that's the goal of the bill. And I could get into a little bit more
Yep.
about how the bill works if that would be helpful.
Well, thank you, Jason. I mean, I think it's a very ambitious bill. But we love the idea that it's holding oil companies accountable and responsible for it because they've made huge profits. But I know that similar bills have already passed in New York and Vermont, and I know there's court cases pending there. And I was just wondering, could you give us a little update of where you see those court cases going that all with the bills that have already passed?
Yeah. I mean, I think the thing that I would say about that is that there is really rock solid legal precedent for these bills. These bills are modeled on federal Superfund legislation. So what some folks might have heard is called CERCLA, which is a federal law that holds companies accountable for, environmental damage that they've caused and holds them accountable for cleanup costs. And it's really the same precedent with this bill, which is that the largest fossil fuel companies, which have been some of the primary emitters of greenhouse gas emissions, should be held accountable for the damage caused by those emissions that they're responsible for. So it's the same premise. And then I would also just say here in California, there is a state law called the Childhood Lead Poisoning Prevention Act, which is a law that has held the paint companies accountable for the lead that they had in their product and the harm caused from that toxic chemical being in their product and then poisoning children. And so there's also precedent in state law here in California.
That's great to hear. So, can you explain how the money will be raised for the bill, and how it will be used, and who would determine that?
Yeah, great question. So the way the bill works is it instructs or requires Cal EPA to do four things. So first, Cal EPA has to identify who the responsible parties are. The responsible parties are any entity that emitted 1 billion metric tons of greenhouse gas emissions from 1990 to 2024. That is a lot of greenhouse gas emissions. So we're only really talking about some of the largest fossil fuel companies in the world. And so Cal EPA's first job is to identify who are the responsible parties. So who are those companies that emitted those many greenhouse gas emissions and that have some history of doing business in California. After identifying the responsible parties, Cal EPA will conduct a comprehensive climate cost study. So the idea of this study is to assess the total climate damage that the state of California has and will endure as a result of the emissions from those companies from 1990 to 2024. And those are global emissions, but it's state harms. After doing that study, then Cal EPA will calculate how much of a fee each company will have to pay for the damage they've caused. The fee that a company will have to pay is proportional to the amount of global emissions they're responsible. So if company A is responsible for 25% of global greenhouse gas emissions from 1990 to 2024, then that company will have to pay 25% of the total cost of climate damage that California has had to endure. So that's the basic idea. And then once Cal EPA assesses those fees, then Then the money goes into a special fund called the Polluters Pay Climate Fund. That special fund will be administered by the Treasury Department in California. Cali PA would develop some more specific criteria for the sorts of projects that should be funded and supported with that money. And then the exact process of allocating those funds would follow California's standard budgeting process. So the governor puts out a budget proposal for the year. So the governor would propose how these special funds are spent and on what projects, following the guidelines that Cali PA has set forth. And then there's some back and forth between the legislature and the governor over the course of the year to make final decisions about how those funds are spent.
Thank you, Jason. I mean, just following up on that, I mean, I know there's a key aspect of, allocating that money is attribution science to determine the accountability of the various fossil fuel companies. Can you just outline very briefly how that works? Because to someone like me, it sounds very complex, how you attribute their responsibility to
Yeah,
each company.
yeah. So climate attribution science has been, just a growing field and has been able to fine tune analyses of exactly what percentage of a climate disaster is attributable to emissions that have been put in the atmosphere by companies or their specific facilities. So they can zero in on exactly like what percentage or what facets of the climate disaster are caused by an amount of emissions. And so Cali PA's calculation as to the fee and what a company would be assessed would be driven by climate attribution science and the leading kind of cutting edge science that we can use these days to assess exactly how much damage has been caused by emissions put into the atmosphere. Yeah.
Thank you, Jason.
Mhm.
So, can you tell us what the status of the bill is in California at present?
Yes. So the bills, so there's an Assembly bill and a Senate bill. Senate bill was introduced by Senator Menjivar, who represents the San Fernando Valley, and the Assembly bill was introduced by Assemblymember Dawn Addis, who represents the Monterey area. Both bills were introduced earlier this year. Both bills passed out of their first policy committees. They're both in the judiciary committees right now. So the Assembly bills in the Assembly Judiciary Committee, the Senate bills in the Senate Judiciary Committee. And we are now entering the second year of a 2-year legislative session. So both bills will have to, in order to move forward, both bills will have to pass through those judiciary committees at the beginning of January. And from there, they would have to pass through the Appropriations Committee, and then they would move to the floor of their respective houses, and they would need to pass those houses by the end of January to keep moving forward.
And what do you think the main obstacles of getting out of those committees will be in January?
Yeah. I think as folks can imagine, there is very significant, well-funded opposition to this bill. Western States Petroleum Association, Chamber of Commerce, all in fierce opposition to this bill. They've been spending tons and tons of money in Sacramento to try to get lawmakers to oppose it and to stop them from voting yes. And then the California State Building Trades is also in opposition to the bill. And so there are very powerful, well-funded, and influential political interests opposing this bill. And it's, a tough political environment right now. The oil industry has really been driving a narrative of high gas prices that could come as a result of refinery closures in the state. And so there are like, quite frankly, some Democratic lawmakers who are scared and nervous to support a bill like this because of what they're hearing from the oil industry. And so what we need to do to counter that is to show A, that there's local support for this bill, B, that there's a lot of support within the districts of these state lawmakers from local governments and local elected officials, that, that those local elected officials are seeing these escalating costs of climate disasters and climate harms and wondering where's the money going to come from to pay for this. And that those local governments need to see some new revenue streams that can help support, all the investments that need to be made at the local level to protect communities from future climate harms and to ensure that climate resilient investments are being made that not only protect communities, but also help mitigate and reduce emissions themselves. So that's the way that I think we can overcome this opposition. And there's just so much important work to do at the local level to make that happen.
That's such a great segue because let's say you're watching this and you're like, wow, this is such an important bill, especially right now in our world, in our country, and what we're facing. I want to help. What can I do? What should I do right away?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So, there's so many folks in, some of these key districts across the state where there are lawmakers who are not sure if they're going to support this bill, that have been meeting with the staff of those legislators. So, if you have not expressed your support for this bill to the staff of those legislators, that is step number one. All sorts of ways to do that. It could be a simple phone call. It could be doing a meeting with the staff of these legislators to share, your unique perspective, your faith perspective as to why you support this bill and why it's important to your community. And, I think the more that those conversations can be geared around, like, here's some of the local costs our community is being hit with because of climate change. Here's like some of the ways in which climate change is making life in California less affordable and how something needs to be done to ensure that the largest fossil fuel companies are paying for their fair share of the damage they've caused. Those are conversations that are really, really important to be having with legislators and their staff right now. And then I'd say the other piece of this is building up more support in those districts. And so, if there are cities and counties in those districts that haven't passed resolutions in support of this bill, that is another really, really valuable thing that could be done, so that we're ensuring that these legislators are hearing, not only from, faith groups and like the climate community, but from a wide diversity of stakeholders, including local elected officials, local businesses. That's what's really going to move the needle and help us build more support and get the votes that we need to move this bill forward.
So some of the folks, listening maybe have not really connected with their local state, politicians, but they might be connected to the city council or the county supervisors. What could those relationships help with in making this Make Polluters Pay?
Yeah, yeah, those relationships can be really, really helpful because the more support from local elected officials, the better the chances are that we have to pass this bill. And so one of our partners on this campaign, Elected Officials to Protect America, has been circulating a letter of support. So one easy thing you could ask, your city council member or mayor or county supervisor to do would be to sign that letter of support. Another thing you could ask them to do is to introduce a resolution in support of this bill and to pass that. And so, for example, my kids go to an elementary school in Oakland, and a lot of parents at the public elementary school have been asking the district, like, what are they going to do to improve cooling measures in classrooms? Like, we see that like temperatures are rising in Oakland. We have like really dated school buildings and school infrastructure here. And so there's money needed to bring more cooling measures into the classroom to make sure kids have a safe environment to learn, that teachers have a safe environment to teach in. And and there's more money needed to do that. And so, I'm working with other parents to work with a school board member for the district to pass a resolution in support of this bill, so that people, lawmakers in Sacramento will know just the, wide diversity of stakeholders that are in support of this important legislation.
Yeah, I think, obviously religious communities are an intergenerational community, and I hear it from the children and youth and young adults that, climate change is an existential issue for them. It's very real. And I think, this is something that we're doing for many generations to come, the impact. And this bill may take some time to get through. We hope it will pass next year, but this is a long-term bill that and a long-term issue of climate change that we are committing to. So thank you, Jason, for raising that.
Thank you so much, Jason, for being with us.
Yeah.
This is really excellent information. And my guess is there's some toolkits that you can send over to us that we can also share with people in case it's like, gosh, I get this, but if somebody could give me some talking points, that would be really easy. So we'll get those and we'll also share those with folks. But yeah, we just really want to thank you so much for taking the
Yeah.
time to share so that we can understand this, so that we can really activate our communities as effectively as possible to fight for this legislation that really can make such a big difference in our state.
Yeah.
So thank
Thank you.
you.
And if
Thank
you're
you so
looking
much for having, oh yeah, sorry, go for it,
I was just
Reverend
saying,
Brown.
and then the next step, if you're looking for what to do on December 11th, we're going to have a follow-up meeting. You'll be receiving links there where we'll help you, guide you, maybe even give you some practice. Like, how do we talk to our local politicians? How do we advocate for those things we take care about with the state legislature, with the city council, with the county? So join us on December 11th. You'll be receiving information about that meeting as well as a next step. So thank you. And
Excellent.
thanks again, Jason, and thank you, Anna, for your work in this.
Very welcome.